This video is for Homework and Mastery 4.4, Section 13.4 in your textbook. Factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. In the previous video we were looking at trinomials with the leading coefficient of 1. Now we'll be looking at trinomials with a leading coefficient that is not equal to 1. The first method that we'll look at is using the trial and error method. What we want to do is look at how we can break up the leading term, the 3x squared, and how we can break up the 1. In order for the coefficient of the x squared term to be 3, the coefficient of the x terms in the factor must be 3. In other words, we have the factors of 3, which are 3 and 1, so we have 3x and 1x. Then we look at our positive 1. We look at factors of this constant. The only factors of this constant are 1 and 1. So we get 3x plus 1 times x plus 1. When I multiply this back together, 3x times x will give me my 3x squared. 3x times 1 gives me 3x, and 1 times x gives me 1x. 3x plus 1x will give me the middle term 4x. 1 times 1 will give me 1. Let's look at an example of the factor using the trial and error method. We want to factor 9x squared minus 13 plus x plus 4. What I'm looking at here is first looking at the factors of the 9 and the factors of 4, my leading coefficient and my constant. My factors of 9 are 3 and 3, 1 and 9. My factors of 4 are 1 and 4, 2 and 2. So I look at all the possible ways I can factor or write down my factors that I've found. I can do 3x and 3x, then I can use a 1 and a 4 or a 2 and a 2. I can also use a 1x and a 9x with the 2 and 2, or the 1x and 9x with the 1 and the 4. All of these will give me my leading coefficient of 9x squared and my constant of a positive 4. My last part that I need to figure out is my negative 13x. When I multiply these, I have 3x times 3x, which is 9x squared. 3x times a negative 2 would be negative 6. Negative 2 times a negative 3x is a negative 6x. Negative 6x plus negative 6x gives me negative 12x. That's not the middle term that I'm looking for. So this possible factor is no longer possible. Here I have 3x times a negative 4, which is negative 12x. Negative 1 times 3x, which is negative 3x. Negative 12x plus a negative 3x gives me a negative 15x. That's still not the middle term I'm looking for, so both of these possible factors are now not possible. Here I have an x times a negative 2, which will give me a negative 2x. Negative 2 times 9x, which will give me a negative 18x. Negative 2x plus negative 18x gives me a negative 20x. Still not the middle term I'm looking for. Here I have x times a negative 4, which is negative 4x. Negative 1 times 9x, negative 9x. Negative 4x plus a negative 9x gives me a negative 13x, which is my middle term. So my factored form of 9x squared minus 13x plus 4 will be x minus 1 times 9x minus 4. Let's try a couple. If I have 5x squared plus 2x minus 7, I must find the factors of my leading coefficient, 5, and the possible factors of my constant, which is 7. So my factors of my leading coefficient are just 1 and 5. My factors of my constant are 1 and 7. Now remember that I have to have a one be positive and one be negative, since my 7 is negative. So I'm going to try x plus 5, put my x and 5x in here, and I'll do positive 1, negative 7, and I'll have a negative 1 and a positive 7. I'll take x times 5x, gives me 5x squared. X times negative 7 gives me a negative 7x. 1 times 5x gives me a positive 5x. Negative 7x plus 5x gives me a negative 2x. That's not the one I'm looking for, because I'm looking for a positive 2x. Here I have x times 7, which gives me a positive 7x. Negative 1 times 5x, which is a negative 5x. Positive 7x minus 5x gives me a positive 2x. This is the correct one that I'm looking for. So my factored form of 5x squared plus 2x minus 7 will be x minus 1 times 5x plus 7. The previous method that we were looking at is trial and error. We must also factor by grouping where we have trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. First we obtain the grouping number a times c. What we're going to do is multiply our leading coefficient times our constant. Then we're going to find two numbers whose product equals a times c and whose sum is equal to b, our middle term. We use those numbers to write bx as the sum of two terms. We factor by grouping, and we multiply to check. Let's do an example or two so you can see what I'm talking about. We have 9x squared, we have 2x squared plus 9x plus 4. So what I'm going to do is first multiply my a times my c, my leading coefficient times my constant. That'll be 2 times 4, which will give me 8. So now I want to find factors of 8 whose sum will be 9. Well, we have factors of 8, which are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. The factors of 8 that add up to 9 are 1 and 8. So we're going to use 1x and 8x. So we're going to write 9x, our middle term, as the sum of x plus 8x. And we're going to rewrite our original equation. We had 2x squared plus 9x plus 4. I have separated the 9x into x plus 8x. So now we have 2x squared plus x plus 8x plus 4. And I can factor by grouping just as we have learned previously. I look at my first two terms and see what I can factor out, which out of 2x squared plus x, I can factor an x. And then I look at my last two terms and see what I can factor out, 8x plus 4. Out of 8x plus 4, I can factor out a 4. When I factor out the x, out of 2x squared plus x, I'm left with 2x plus 1. When I factor a 4 out of 8x plus 4, I'm left with 2x plus 1. Notice what is inside my parentheses is the exact same. So now I want to factor my parentheses out, my 2x plus 1, and I'll be left with x plus 4. So we have now factored 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 into 2x plus 1 times x plus 4. Let's look at another example. We have 8x squared plus 10x minus 3. I first need to take my leading coefficient times my constant, which will be 8 times negative 3, and I get negative 24. I want to find two numbers whose product is negative 24 and whose sum is a positive 10, my middle term. The two numbers that I will use are going to be 12 and negative 2. So I will rewrite my 10x as the sum of 12x and a negative 2x. So here I've rewritten 8x squared plus 10x minus 3 as 8x squared plus 12x minus 2x plus 3. Minus 3. If you notice, if I take and simplify and combine like terms, the 12x minus 2x will give me the 10x. I don't want to combine like terms though, because I want to factor by grouping. I want to look at my first two terms and decide what can I factor out of 8x squared plus 12x. I can actually factor out a 4x. Out of a negative 2x minus 3, I can only factor out a negative 1. There's no other number that will go into 2 and 3, and there's no variable that is the same. But remember, I always want to make this a positive, so I'm going to factor out a negative 1. So now I have 4x times 2x plus 3 minus 1 times 2x plus 3. Notice my parentheses are the exact same. Now I can factor out my parentheses of 2x plus 3 and put my leftovers, my 4x minus 1, in the second set of parentheses. So we have factored 8x squared plus 10x minus 3 into 2x plus 3 times 4x minus 1. Remember, whenever you factor, you can always check yourself by multiplying these back together. You also must remember to look and see if there is a greatest common factor to factor out prior to trying either one of these methods, the trial and error method or the factor by grouping method. If you need any help, please let one of us know and we'll be glad to help you.